Welcome into At the Book for Thursday, November the 18th, our last pre-Thanksgiving edition. I'm Zach Ewing here on bet.NOLA.com along with Devin Jackson and Jim Derry. And At the Book is brought to you by the Caesars Sportsbook. We thank y'all for joining us today. If you're on YouTube, drop us a like, give us a subscribe, a comment, whatever you feel like you are willing to do. If you're on Facebook, live comments are on, and so we can answer questions as we go or read your comments. We are here to preview the weekend in sports and sports betting, and that begins with tonight's game between the Falcons and Patriots. But first, I do want to mention that you can go to sorry, Devin, I jumped the gun on you there. That you can go to NOLA.com/Caesars and pick up your free $100 bet promotion. You can do it now. The mobile app is not ready just yet, but I take that back. The app is ready. You can't use it just yet because the law has not been approved yet, but you can download the app, go to NOLA.com/Caesars to do that. And when you do, automatic have a promo code to get your $100 free bet bonus. So we encourage you to do that. And hopefully by Christmas time, we'll have a nice present under the tree. The mobile app will be working. You can bet those like NBA Christmas Day games or the NFL games the next day. It'll be a lot of fun. Jim, you have a bemused look on your face.
I hope you don't fumble your picks like you fumbled the Open on live TV.
What would be different about why should this week be any different?
It shouldn't be, but we'll see. I'm just waiting to drink a root beer.
No, we'll talk about that root beer, my man. We'll talk about your teasers. That you just can't stay away, can you?
No, they've worked for me for the most part. I mean, they didn't work last week, but overall, they've been pretty good.
Overall, you're still owing me that root beer.
To be fair, nothing worked last week for anyone. So
when Devin had a bad week, it's a bad week.
Devin had a bad week and ended up a plus $11. So it's like, if that's your bad week, you're doing pretty good. Jim and I are like afraid to go outside in case the bookies are around trying to catch us. So we'll talk about all that. But we are ready to talk about Thursday Night Football now. That's how the weekend will start. It is Patriots at Falcons. And this is an interesting one. I know a lot of people who are actually on both sides of this, who lay in the 6.5 and who are taking the home dog here. The line has actually come down from 7 to 6.5. It's one of those where if you just look at last week, Patriots kill the Browns, Falcons go to Dallas and get thumped. Like you think, there's no way the Patriots lose this game, especially Falcons don't have Calvin Ridley still. They may not have Cordero Patterson. But this is the NFL, Jim, and so last week really doesn't matter all that much.
Oh, I love talking about Drunk Joe, and especially Aunt Mabel this time of year because it's Thanksgiving time and she's making her fruitcakes. And let me tell you, everybody that watched any football last week is all over the Patriots. They can't lose. They're the best team in the AFC now. Or they could be. Bill Belichick is the greatest coach in the history. Well, he may be the greatest coach in the history of football. But, it's one of those ones where the big money is going to be on Atlanta here. And there's a reason why. Because Atlanta is up and down. Sometimes they play very well. Sometimes they play like the worst team in the NFL. And I think on a short week, going back home after the embarrassing performance they put up last week, it's the perfect spot for them. New England on a short week. Looking ahead, they got some division opponents coming up. They very easily could be looking towards the Buffalo Bills on the horizon. And you got to think they were putting in prep time for the Bills, just like the Saints did against the Seahawks a few weeks ago on a Monday night when they were thinking about Tampa Bay. And although the Saints won that game, they certainly didn't look very good. And I think New England's in a similar situation here. We'll see in my big bucks pick. I got a small bet on the Atlanta money line, but I really like the spread. If you, I might even go as far to buy a hook and get it at 7. But this is certainly, it would not surprise me at all. Again, as we'll see in big bucks, is I think you're getting a great price on the money line for Atlanta. If Atlanta won this game straight up, and I think it's going to be a lower scoring kind of game on a short week.
It looks like Vince Lane disagrees with you. Patriots are a guaranteed win. News for you, Vince. There's no such thing in the NFL. There is no such thing in the NFL. Devin, what are you thinking tonight?
You know what? I'm not gonna bring up my Thursday night argument because I think this game is
No.
actually gonna turn out to be pretty good.
You just did. though.
I was going to let that go this week. I really was. I mean, Devin shouldn't be able to watch football next Thursday because Thursday football stinks. Okay, so Devin, you go get your turkey. Find maybe some bad basketball on TV, or I don't know, maybe golf highlights or something. I don't know what, but you should be able to watch football next Thursday because Thursday football is just terrible.
Yeah, that's a fair point. But anyway, back to the game.
Jim wasn't going to let that slide.
I know.
Just to review, that was not letting anything slide. Go ahead, Devin.
It should be a good game tonight. I think the Falcons will obviously play much better than they did on Sunday against the Cowboys. I mean, it's pretty hard not to at this point. I also think the Patriots are a little bit overhyped at this point of the season. I know that they look good right now, but if you look at the teams they've been playing, it's not exactly the greatest wins. I mean, they got 2 wins against the Jets. You got a beat up Browns team that they absolutely thumped. So you got to give them credit. But they do have some pretty tough losses as well. So this could be a game where Atlanta sneaks out with a win. I could very well see it happen. And if I were to choose any bet on this game, I would take Atlanta plus 6.5 in tonight's game.
Also, I kind of like a little sprinkle on the under too. It's 47. We'll see. I don't feel real confident about that, but I could see it being a real cagey game. Interesting point you brought up though, Jim, that people are out there thinking the Patriots are the best team in the AFC. In y'all's eyes, who is the best team in the AFC right now? Who is the most likely team to make the Super Bowl? Because I have my answer. I'm curious to know yours.
I mean, I still think right now, if you're just picking a team and who, if all odds are even, which they aren't, obviously, I still think the Buffalo Bills are the best team in the NFC. I mean, the AFC. I like what Tennessee's done, and especially like what they've done, without Derrick Henry, and they found ways to win, and they beat the teams that we've called the best teams in the AFC, the Chiefs and the Bills, and they beat the Rams without Derrick Henry. But I still think the Bills are the team to beat in the AFC. And when all is said and done, I really am interested to see what they do the next few weeks going forward, because if the Bills are going to be the best team in the AFC, they need to start turning it on and not against just mediocre and bad teams. They need to be – this is a true test for them this week against the Colts, and we'll see what they're made of.
Yeah, I mean, I really think the Bills may be the best team. They're going to be on the road in January right now, at least at Tennessee, and maybe it could fall even further than that. Devin, what say you? Best team in the AFC? I'm
going to agree with Jim. I think it's Buffalo as well. I just look at some of the other teams in the AFC. The way that they're playing is pretty unsustainable. The Titans have been able to sneak by even without Derrick Henry, and they may have him back in January, but teams are going to load the box, and Tannehill hasn't looked all that impressive, even with all the new weapons that he has. So I don't necessarily trust him to go out and win a game for Tennessee. And then you look at Baltimore; they're pretty up and down as well. They've had some great wins, against like the Chiefs and some of the best teams in the NFL, but they also laid eggs. They laid an egg against the Dolphins, against the Bengals. So you can't really trust them either. So me picking the Bills to win or at least represent the AFC in the Super Bowl is also based on some of the inconsistencies with some of these other top teams as well. So I think the Bills are the most complete team in the AFC, and I think I will trust them in January more so than some of these other teams.
Zach, don't say Baltimore.
I thought that was going to be interesting. I think it's Buffalo too. I thought we were all going to have different answers. We all think the same thing. I will say somebody's got to knock off Kansas City. And I know that seems like, based on what we've seen so far, no sweat. But if last week really was the start of Kansas City rolling, they're going to be a factor also. But I agree with you guys. I think it's Buffalo right now. And I think that's a good bet, honestly, because they're devalued a little bit right now. If you can get them to win the AFC, I think you're getting pretty good odds at that. I'll check, but I think that's a pretty good bet.
I think there's someone in the ballpark of minus 250 or plus 250 or plus 300, somewhere around there.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's around 3-1. So I'll check on that. In the meantime, here on At the Book on bet.nola.com, it's brought to you by the Caesar Sportsbook. And we want to get to this week's edition of Cashin' In with Carville. You can play Cashin' In with Carville by going to NOLA.com/cashin'. Make your picks on 8 select games every week against James Carville. If you beat him for a month, you win prize. If you are one of the top finishers throughout the season, you win an even bigger prize. So go to NOLA.com/cashin' and take care of that. In fact, this week we were not able to get James on the phone. He did give us his picks, and so let's go through those picks. Remember, he always automatically picks the Saints, automatically picks LSU. Here are the rest of James Carville's picks. Michigan State at Ohio State. The Buckeyes laying 19 points, and that scared James off just a little bit. He is taking the Spartans plus 19. So that's his pick, Michigan State. Other college game we've got is Alabama and Arkansas, a little SEC West battle. And here the points did not scare off James. He takes the Crimson Tide laying 20.5. The hook in your favor there if you bet on Alabama. And then finally, our last college game, and this is an interesting one, and we'll talk more about this one. Oregon, number 3 in this week's college football playoff rankings, guys, is an underdog by 3 points in Salt Lake City. And Carville did take the Ducks to win in Salt Lake City. But that's an interesting one. That's one of those ones where, boy, does the book know more than I do? I don't know. But he takes Oregon plus 3. Moving on to the NFL, again, automatically takes the Saints. Other 3 games we're picking this week, Packers minus 2.5 in Minnesota. And Mr. Carville takes the Vikings. Then we have the Bengals and the Raiders, another interesting one. The Bengals minus 1, and that line is stuck there all week long. And he does take Joe Burrow's boys, the Cincinnati Bengals. And then finally, the afternoon showdown, the Chiefs, we were just talking about them, 2.5-point favorites against the Cowboys, and James takes Dallas. So those are his picks this week. That's Michigan State, Alabama, Oregon, the Vikings, the Bengals, and the Cowboys.
I don't know whether to be scared or happy because we have all the same picks except for I took Ohio State. So, and he hasn't been great lately. So I don't know whether to be happy or not.
He had a real good September, real bad October, and he's been like right at 500 in November. So,
yeah.
Maybe he'll settle for a 500 week. Jeff Duncan ran you down in Cashin' In with Carville.
All right, it took him about 6 weeks. He finally caught me. So, I knew I had I had gone 4-0 with my NFL picks 3 straight weeks. You just can't continue that. I mean, and I knew last week, look at the schedule, it was one of those weird weeks. I didn't have it was going to happen. So we'll catch him back. We still got quite a few weeks left, and I'm ready to pounce on him.
What you're saying is Duncan is now the hunted. You can go hunt him down.
It's Duncan.
I hope he's listening. I really do. So again, if you want to play Cashin' In with Carville, go to NOLA.com/cashin'. Make your picks against the spread each week, and you can win prizes. It's fun stuff. I do want to talk about some college games and some pro games, but let's start with the local teams as we usually do. LSU, quite frankly, this is a game. I do wonder what the attendance will be at Tiger Stadium for this one. It's a late start, 8 p.m. It's going to be fairly cold. They're playing ULM. LSU has basically nothing to play for. They could still make a bowl game if they win this game and beat Texas A&M next week. Number one, that's a long shot. Number two, even if you think you could beat A&M, this game is a gimme. They're 29-point favorites. I just struggle to find anything to get excited about here.
Yeah, it's one of those. There's nothing can happen good here because if you win by 40, you're supposed to win by 40, right? Theoretically, they're not going to lose to Monroe. Monroe is really not good. I mean, if this were like a different mid-major type team, I don't know. I think this is a great spot for LSU to whip up on somebody. I think they will. Although that they probably spent most of the week preparing for Texas A&M. I think that they're going to be able – look, Davis Price is going to run all over these boys if he plays for more than a half or so. I just think this is a great spot. I don't think UL Monroe is going to score very much against LSU. So I might even like the under here because I really think Monroe might get shut out.
I mean, the way LSU's defense has been playing, that's a possibility. They have been playing well. UL Monroe did beat Liberty earlier this year, which was a shock. They were like 31-point dogs in that game and beat Liberty. Amazing that they're less of an underdog to LSU than they were to Liberty. But part of that may be because they turned around and beat Liberty. They're playing a little bit better. So, Devin, you are a college scouting extraordinaire. What can you tell us about ULM and Coach Bowden up there, Terry Bowden?
I can't tell you a lot. It's been a struggling season for them. Really, last couple seasons, UL Monroe has struggled, and I would be surprised if they scored more than a touchdown or two in this game. I know they beat Liberty. It's 31-point dogs, and we'll talk about Liberty playing another local team coming up this weekend, but I just don't see them making this really a competitive game. I think LSU should roll over them pretty easily. They should, frankly, blow them out by halftime, and we shouldn't have much to say about this game, over the weekend. And basically, it's going to be a win or you're done for the season type of scenario next week against Texas A&M.
Yeah, I don't know. The spread is intriguing here. It might be the only way to make this game interesting, quite frankly, because that 29th point's a little bit, you could see like a 31-3, a 35-7, something like that. Getting that 29th point might be just a little bit more difficult for LSU. So that is an interesting one. It is also quite probably Ed Ogeron's last victory at LSU, right?
There's an excellent chance that's the case. I mean, I'm sticking by what I said before the Florida game. I said I thought they had a decent chance to beat Florida because they matched up well against them. But I thought that was Florida and Arkansas to me were the only two chances that LSU had way back when. I thought the only chances they had left for victory. They didn't pull it off against Arkansas. They had their chances too. And I don't think there's any way they beat Texas A&M. I'll have to wait to see what the spread is. I'm not saying I'm going to be going full bore Texas A&M with the spread. It depends on what it is. But I don't see any way they beat the Aggies, who know that they have to win. They're no longer in the playoff talk, but they certainly want to be playing on New Year's Day. Texas A&M is going to be very focused next week.
Yeah, Texas A&M a real good shot at being a Sugar Bowl representative. Probably them or Arkansas or Ole Miss at this point, I guess, would be your three contenders for that spot. So it is it's interesting. Yeah, Ole Miss is a fun team to watch. My question is, who from the Big 12? I guess Oklahoma State.
Yeah,
I mean they've been here not too long ago, right? They were here now. I don't remember when the last time I covered the Sugar Bowl. Whenever I did, it was Arkansas State and Oklahoma State was in it. So I don't remember when that was.
Yeah, let's see. Last year was Baylor, Georgia. The year before was the playoff. It was Alabama and Clemson. And the year before that, I think, was Texas and Georgia. That was the year Bevo attacked Douglas. So maybe it was 4 years ago Oklahoma State was in it. So anyway, interesting. The bowl positioning is starting to take shape. And I still maintain, yes, it would be absolutely great for LSU fans if they could beat A&M and kind of knock them down another peg. I don't know that this team really wants to be in a bowl. Does anybody really want, you're going to go be in the Birmingham Bowl and Ed Ogeron's going to hang out another month? Or alternatively, he's got to step down and now you've got to go through the interim thing for a month. And it's just kind of messy. I think from LSU perspective, end this season, move on to 2022 and the new coach.
I agree with that, but the only thing is I don't think Ed Ogeron thinks like that. I don't necessarily think it's about the bowl game per se. I don't think he's using that as a fire, but I do think one thing he's shown is at least the team have shown up to play. And that's one thing you had to wonder 3 or 4 weeks ago whether they would, and they have. And so that's why, I mean, I don't know what the line's going to be. I'm going to guess it's going to be in the 10 to 13 range. But I'll probably take LSU with the spread because I do think that they will fight. And so I expect them to play hard. I just don't think that'll matter. But I do think that they'll show up and play next week.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I don't think – I mean, listen, full credit to Ed Ogeron because they have played hard since he was removed as head coach. And I think they will continue to play hard. And I don't think by any means I'm saying they're going to throw the game or not show up or whatever.
No.
I just think from an administrative level and from a fan level, that's not a game you care if you lose, because the bowl game really muddies the waters for next year. So
maybe if they win, maybe Lincoln Riley can coach the team.
That's the other thing about this coaching search is you hear a name and then Bruce Feldman comes out. No, Lincoln Riley's not going to be the head coach. Oh, Mel Tucker. Nope, Mel Tucker signed an extension. Okay, well, who's next on the list? And I really think we're to the point where Dave Aranda and Billy Napier are legitimate contenders for that job. Either one, and I think either one would be a good choice, by the way.
I think if they don't get Lincoln Riley, I think you're right. I think that's where they have to go. But I mean, if you're Lincoln Riley, you can pass up that kind of money, or do you want to stay at Oklahoma and go in the SEC and be mediocre? Because that's what Oklahoma is going to do when they get in the SEC.
You and Carville feel the same way on that one, Devin. If you end up with
Arkansas.
If you end up with Aranda or Napier, I know that would feel like settling a little bit because LSU obviously went after some big names, but those are good coaches, right?
Yeah, both are really good coaches. I mean, Aranda already turned around Baylor's program and made them competitive in the Big 12 in two seasons, not even 2 seasons. And then you look at Napier and what he's done with the Raging Cajuns, have them hosting a Sun Belt championship game. So both have kind of experience with building and kind of bringing back some of the success of the program that they're currently at. And I think they would both do a great job at LSU. They both have Louisiana ties. I mean, obviously Aranda being a defensive coordinator at LSU, he understands what the kind of, what kind of that position it brings and whatnot. And the defense would probably be back to form of what we're normally seeing with him back at head coach. And then you got Napier. He has the kind of Louisiana, recruits coming to the Raging Cajuns already. And then you give him like a bigger platform to recruit and get more money and backing and in recruiting as well. I think both would do a great job with LSU, and the program's in good hands. I mean, I know they've struggled the last couple of seasons, but the resources are there for them to both be successful as LSU's next coach if either one gets the job.
Moving around the college football landscape just a little bit before we turn our attention back to the NFL, more likely to be upset this week, Ohio State against Michigan State or Alabama against Arkansas. Both are home, playing ranked opponents who have good wins this year, but they're both favored by 19 to 20 points. So, Jim, you first. Alabama or Ohio State, who should be on upset watch?
Either.
No chance.
They're both going to win easily. You give me a money line on a parlay, a money line parlay on those two. In fact, maybe I'll go find out if I can do that because that's done. Neither one of those teams are losing this week.
All
especially
right.
Alabama. So if I had to pick one, and I still say none, there is 0 chance Alabama loses this week.
Devin, I'm going to look up what that money line parlay is. What do you think? Should either of those teams, Buckeyes or Crimson Tide, be on upset watch this week?
I would feel confident that neither team will lose, but if I had to pick one, Ohio State should absolutely be the one on upset alert. I think Alabama's they're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. They know what they have to do to get back to the SEC championship game. Ohio State, they've had signature wins, but they also had weeks they struggled. So I would be a little bit worried about them probably in the first half. I wouldn't be surprised if Michigan State gave them a scare in the first half. I think second half they get things going, and Ohio State and Alabama both win this weekend.
I pulled out the trusty Rusty Caesar Sportsbook app, which you can download by going to NOLA.com/Caesars, just to put in these bets. It's interesting. Ohio State's minus 1,100 on the money line. Alabama's minus 1,700. Even though the difference in point spread is only 1.5, it's crazy, the money line difference. So if you put them together, a 2-leg parlay is still only paying you minus 625.
Okay, so you got a 6 to 1. I mean, I'm not going to lay that, but
yeah, it's probably too much. But
yeah, I mean, it's not that bad of a bet.
I personally would say Alabama has maybe just a slightly bigger risk than Ohio State, and it's just because Alabama's offense has scuffled just a little bit. I mean, we saw them against LSU. Even the week before that, they were playing Tennessee. I have that right, and they, just kind of took them a couple quarters to put away Tennessee. And Arkansas is a good defensive ball club, and I don't know, I don't think they can win, but I could see Arkansas hanging around for a half or maybe well into the third quarter in that game and just maybe making the people in Tuscaloosa nervous. I don't think that'll be the case with Ohio State. We'll see. Other question I have for you in the college landscape. We talked about it with Cashin and with Carville. What do you do with this Oregon-Utah game? Oregon's number 3 in the country. If they win, they're going to be in the playoff. But they're getting 3 points at Utah, who's just sort of had a middling season. They're like 6-4. Devin, what's your take on this one?
This is a very dangerous game for Oregon. They've been sleepwalking in first halves of games. They're at Utah. It's not an easy place to play. I believe it's going to be a prime time matchup as well. I know on the East Coast is still sun might just start going down by the start of this game, but this is not a good position for Oregon to be in because they have to win out. And the Pac-12 has been a mess this year. Teams that are expected to win are losing. Oregon lost to Stanford earlier in the season, and Stanford has been pretty awful in the Pac-12. So I would be worried as an Oregon fan because they are known to have a huge letdown during the season. I know they lost to Stanford, but some of that was their own doing. Some of that was just some bad calls in that game. But in this game, I think if they don't get out to a good start in this game, they're going to put themselves in a hole and they could very well lose on Saturday night. So I'll be very worried if I was an Oregon fan. And honestly, I don't think they win out. That's just me personally. I think they trip up at some point over the next couple of weeks. Oregon State is much improved. They play them in their final game and then the Pac-12 championship game as well. So I'll be worried as an Oregon fan.
Yeah, the Civil War next week and then probably Arizona State in the Pac-12 championship. Oregon's an interesting team. They have the worst loss of any team in the top 10. That loss to Stanford. They also have the best winning at Ohio State of any team in the top 10. Jim, when you see a line like this, because you love to follow the money and see where it goes and everything, it's just one of those lines that smells funny when you see Utah favored by 3 here. What do you make of it?
Well, I agree wholeheartedly. It's definitely one where, but the weird lines don't necessarily mean as much in college football as they mean in the NFL. And I've noticed that throughout the year. Like a lot of times I'll go and look at the little newsletter we get from Caesars, and just because a lot of money is on a certain team, normally in the NFL, that's a major red flag. If you got 90% of the money on a team, you always bet the other way. I mean, every time. I don't care what your gut says, what you think. There's no way this team cannot cover or whatever. In the NFL, you go on that 100% of the time. In college football, I tried doing that a little bit early in the year, and I never really paid as much attention to it before this year as I have this year, and it doesn't always work that way. So fishy lines don't necessarily mean as much to me here. This one is definitely super fishy. But here's what you want to hear from your sports betting writer, right? I have no idea what's going to happen in this game. I really don't. I won't touch this one with a 10-foot pole. I'm staying away from it. I only picked it here because we had to pick it in the Carville contest, but I won't be touching that one on Saturday no matter what happens with the line.
No, I think I'm with you. It's interesting because I actually think the matchup favors Oregon. Utah's got to run the ball to be successful. Oregon's dynamite on the defensive line. I mean, that's the strength of that team. And if they stop Utah from running, Oregon's offense is not great, but you could see them grinding out just a 24-14 win, something like that. And so to me, just looking at it from what I know of the teams, the matchup seems to favor Oregon, and yet the line still started Utah -3, hasn't moved off that spot. That's probably the best home field advantage in the Pac-12 is at Utah, and so that's a factor also. But that'll be one to watch. I mean, I know we like to poo-poo the Pac-12, but that's probably the most interesting game going into this weekend for me is Oregon and Utah. All right, moving on to the NFL here on At the Book. This is brought to you by Caesar Sportsbook. We're here with you on bet.NOLA.com. I'm Zach Ewing along with Jim Derry and Devin Jackson. The New Orleans Saints are in the city of brotherly love this weekend. They're facing the Philadelphia Eagles, second straight road game for the Saints before they come home for a couple of Thursday night games. The Eagles are 1.5-point favorites. The look-ahead line on this game was a pick. I think we were a little surprised by that.
It was Saints -1.
Okay, Saints, by the time I saw it, it was already a pick. So the money has been coming in on the Eagles and respected enough money to move that line to jump the fence, to go the other way. Philly's favored. Again, Jim, I ask you, what do you make of that?
I went back and forth on this one multiple times. Anyone that's listened to Datitude this week knows what I think of where the Saints are, especially offensively. But saying that, two things that are big about this game. First off, I don't think you can trust the money in this game because for some unknown reason, all season long, the Sharps love the Eagles. I have no idea why they love the Eagles, but they do. They've been betting them every week. They bet them this week. And the ones that I trust, that I listen to and kind of follow, and again, I don't. By the time I make my picks, that they haven't even talked yet, so I've already made my picks by the time I listen to the guys I really respect. But I was hoping they would be in line with what I thought because I changed my pick, and I'm in Peyton. I trust. I mean, this is one of those games. It's a must-win game for the Saints, and when it comes down to it, and I'm struggling with what to pick, in Peyton, I trust. I don't know what he's going to come up with this week, but he tends to do his best jobs in games like this when their backs are up against the wall, and that's why I like the Saints this week to win. But normally, everything else about my handicap, when you look at our offense versus their defense and their offense versus our defense, points to a lower scoring Philadelphia victory. But somehow I think the Saints are going to come up with some things and find a way to win, and it's not based on logic. It's just based on, well, I guess it's based on logic, but it's not based on what I've seen the past few weeks. It's more based on what I've seen the past 16 years. And I'm betting on Sean Payton in this one.
We talk about it all the time. We've talked about it several times this year. Saints are now 11-3 straight up in their last 14 games as an underdog, and they have covered in 13 of 14, including last week against Tennessee. The only loss against the spread in that game, I believe, was at home against the Chiefs last year, and that was like they were 2.5-point dogs and lost by 3. So, I mean, very, very close to the spread even there.
And some had a 3, so some had that as a tie.
Yeah, some had a push. Yeah. So I mean, they when they have been underdogs, they have been dynamite. Now, a lot of times you're not talking about a 1.5-point spread like this, and so does that? Trends aren't going to last forever, but that's been a strong one. Devin?
Yeah, and in this game particularly, it's really going to come down to which offense can make plays, because both offenses have struggled this season in terms of moving the football and being consistent from week to week. I mean, the Eagles will have a week where they look really good offensively, and then the next week they look like they can't move the ball past midfield. And it's the same thing with the Saints. And this is a Saints team that hasn't won in Philly since the 2013 season. Last 2 matchups they had in Philly, they lost both of them, including last year's 24-21 loss. I think the Saints will come ready to play. I think this is a game they got to have to stay pacing the NFC playoff picture, and more for a psychological thing. They have to be able to win the close games, and that's what it takes in NFL. It's the difference between now this season will be a 7-10 team and a 10-7 team. Those close games matter, and the Saints just haven't been winning them this year, but they've been in almost every game they played in the season, minus the Panthers game. So the Saints are going to come ready to play. I think Philly will try some things early on to try and fool the Saints defense, try to get them, loosen up in the back end, because Philly likes to run the football a lot. So I think it'll come down to which team can stay on the field and move the football. And I trust the Saints a little bit more than I do the Eagles.
Practice reports, injury reports, no Alvin Kamara in Thursday's practice, no Teron Armstead, no Ryan Ramczyk. Taysom Hill, I think, is limited with his foot injury, so it looks like Trevor Siemian again. So the Saints are banged up. There's no doubt about that. And like you say, Jim, on paper, it kind of looks like it makes sense why the Eagles are favored here. However, Sean Payton usually has a few tricks up his sleeve when he has to. So we'll see what happens.
I'm going to tell you real quick, Zach, also, because it seems so obvious, this is one of those games where it would be obvious to take the under, right? I like the over. I think there's going to be some weird things. Sean's going to have some weird plays going on. I do think Jalen Hurts will have a chance to have a decent game. So it's a game where you would say the Saints defense has to play well for the Saints to win the game, and I think they will play well overall. But I think there's going to be some weird plays in this game, and I sneakily like the over in this game, and the over is kind of the Saints have found a way to be over the last few weeks, and I think that continues this week because, like I said, it looks like the under's too good to be true. And in the NFL, unlike college, when it's too good to be true, it's almost always definitely too good to be true.
And these teams have scored points. I mean, look, it's a low total, 43. If you look at the last few weeks, even under Trevor Siemian, the Saints are scoring more than 20 points a game. The Eagles are scoring more than 20 points a game. So if that holds true, 43 actually suddenly doesn't seem that high. So I agree with you on that. Hey, let's play big bucks. All right, because this is going to be fun. Because Jim has a new strategy this week because none of his other strategies work, so he's trying something new. First, a quick recap of last week and how things didn't work for Jim or for me. And for Devin, they only worked a little bit, which is odd for him. Devin, you were 11 over. You hit Boston College. We were all on the Browns last week, and we told you it was scary when we're all like the same team. So I guess that's why.
Yeah, Browns stunk it up last week. And that's why I'm just limiting myself to one NFL pick a week because I just keep losing money on NFL games. But that it just wasn't a good overall week. A lot of weird things happening in both the college and NFL level. So I'll take the plus 11 and just move on to the next week. Just
that's right.
Just move on.
Sometimes even 11 under is okay if you're making money in the other weeks. Jim, you hit the Saints barely, although I think you could argue they should have won that game outright. Let's talk about your teasers, man. That teaser right there went over. Your other teaser lost too because of the Browns, but you keep going back to that well.
Oh, it's you can say whatever you want. I think I pick out as a handicapper. If you lose a couple of weeks, so if you believe in a strategy and you say I'm doing something different, I'm really not doing anything different. The only thing I'm doing different is some money lines on some favorites that I think are super solid, and I like better than 5.5 to 1 with Tampa Bay. I like better than 3.4 to 1 with Buffalo. We'll get to that in a minute, but the teasers overall I think are good bets if you find the right numbers to do them at. And honestly, when I look back at this first teaser that I lost, the Bucs probably were not the best play there because they didn't pass the 3 line. So Vegas has realized how much money they've lost on teasers this year because the first 7-8 weeks of the year they lost a ton of money on teasers, and so they set this Bucs line purposefully at 9.5. If it goes up, fine, but they set it there for a reason, and that's so it didn't cross below that teaser line. And so really this was a bad bet. I mean, you can always look back at bets you lose and say it was a bad bet, but in this case, Bucs minus 3.5 was a bad bet. If I had to do Ravens over again, I'm going to do that 10 times out of 10, just giving a point after the Dolphins because they're going to win that game to me 8 times out of 10. So to me, that was an excellent teaser bet there, even though it didn't hit. So it's more about what the numbers are than it necessarily is about who the teams are. And that's the thing you got to learn about teasers. And I still am firmly entrenched in if you get the right one and the right numbers and you go through the right numbers, and we've talked about this before, then it's a good bet. If you lose it, you lose it. But you get those right numbers and you go with them and you trust in what you believe.
Yeah, I mean, hey, and I commend you for sticking with it, and you've got a couple more this week that we'll talk about in a minute. I really liked Ohio State last week. Probably should have bet more on that one. And then Cincinnati, I mean, it's not your week. It was a Friday night game. Cincinnati had a 31-7 lead in that game midway through the third quarter. They're already, when you're laying that many points, if you're covering by mid-third quarter, you're on cloud 9 because you've got the better team. You're probably going to add another touchdown or two, and maybe you're just worried about the back door. But then Cincinnati gave up like a 99-yard touchdown drive, an 80-yard play. And look, I'm done with the Bearcats, man. They actually still almost covered that spread. They needed another touchdown, but it was a frustrating week to say the least. So let's move on. Let's do next week. Let's do week 11. And Devin, I want you to talk about them Raging Cajuns getting 4.5 against Liberty. And I'm trying so hard not to do the insurance jingle, but they're playing Liberty.
I was going to say that earlier, and I hate to interrupt, but every time you say Liberty, I can't think, but it's singing in my head. I wish they would have changed their name to something.
It's so dang catchy. But what do you not like about Liberty there, Devin?
Well, first of all, they lost to UL Monroe earlier this season. I know you don't have to necessarily always go back to games, but they just haven't been impressive this season, in my opinion. I know they have a decent record. They play a independent schedule, so they get to play whoever they want. They didn't look overly impressive against Ole Miss. They didn't look impressive against Syracuse early in the season.
You faded them
And
a couple times, I think, and
yeah,
won.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I don't trust them against the spread. I just don't trust the team in general. And the Raging Cajuns are playing like one of the better teams in college football, and I don't see how coming into this game that they were faded by this much. 4.5 points to a team going to the Sun Belt Championship game, and it's been one of the more competitive teams. I mean, they beat Texas last year, kept it close against Texas this year. They have so many quality games that you look back to, and they just have the better coach, in my opinion, Billy Napier over Hugh Freeze. So I just like the Raging Cajuns this week. I think they just win outright in this game.
Makes you wonder. The only thing I'll say to that is could UL be looking forward to a rivalry game next week against ULM, possibly, or a Sun Belt Championship game in a couple weeks, or could Billy Napier have his eyes 60 miles to the east and be thinking about a certain job in Baton Rouge to where maybe the team's level drops just a little bit? I'm just not saying it will happen, but those are things that I wonder about. Jim, we talk about teasers crossing key numbers. You've got a couple of them here. The Bills go down to 1 point, where even if they just win by one, you get a push there, and the Saints going up to 7.5.
Yeah, I was so locked in last week, and I go back to Tampa Bay. So locked in on Tampa Bay. How can they not play better against a football team coming off a loss, a bye? Again, I didn't look at the number as well as I should have. Well, this week I paid a lot more attention to numbers as I should have. Look, we all have our lapses, and this week, look, I love Buffalo this week. I really do. I love them in every form, fashion. I think Buffalo I think the Colts have done well against mid-level and bad teams. I don't think they played well against really good teams, and this Bills defense is going to be tough on Carson Wentz this week. I think the Bills are ready to hit their stride. I love the Bills this week, and again, so to me, you're getting they're at 7, so you get them past the 6, you get them past the 3.5, you get past the 2.5 even, and so Bills basically just to win, and then again the Saints, even if they don't win this week, I really don't think they get blown out. And so you take them, and now the spread's actually all the way to it's either 2 or 2.5 at the moment. It has moved in the last 24 hours. If you take the Saints, again, you get them past those critical numbers as well. I don't think the Saints get blown out. They may lose. I don't love them against the spread, but I really don't think they get blown out. I would be surprised if they get blown out. Hence, we got a big tease right there, Bills and Saints.
Yeah, you're right. The line has moved to 2 at Caesars Sportsbook, so the Saints are now +2 just in the last few hours since we got these graphics together. So that is interesting. I'm going with TCU -21 at Kansas. This is just one of those classic. TCU didn't play real well last week against Oklahoma State. Kansas obviously had the shock of the college football season in beating Texas. But because of those two things, you're looking at a line that probably would have been 24, 26 points a week ago, and now I'm getting 21. I'm getting TCU at home. I'm getting Kansas off of an emotional game, ripe for a letdown. I love the spot for the Horned Frogs, so might be one that I look back on next week and say I should have put more on it, just like I did with Ohio State last week. Going through the big bucks picks, Devin is running away with this thing. He's almost up at the $2,500 mark, almost up 25% from our starting mark of $2,000. Devin, tell us about a couple of your picks here.
So first one on the board, Air Force and Nevada. I'm taking the over on 52.5. Both offenses have been scoring a ton this season, and I was surprised about kind of a relatively low total. So I'm taking the over in that game. Nebraska, they have kept games close all season long against some of the best teams in the Big Ten. I think they'll do the same thing against Wisconsin. Wisconsin's not an overly explosive team. Nebraska basically beats itself in every loss with turnovers. I know turnovers will be a factor in this game, but I honestly think they'll be able to cover that 9.5 point spread against Wisconsin and keep it close. Cincy, I do not like them in betting odds pretty much going forward. I think SMU will keep it within 10 points at the very least. I know it says 11.5 on the board, but I think 10-point game sounds reasonable for this type of matchup with a high scoring matchup between these two teams. Then finally, I kind of previewed it earlier in the week on odds and ends, but I'm taking the Colts +7 against the Bills. The Colts have just been playing a lot better football as of late. And I think they keep it relatively close to the Bills. Not saying that they're going to win the game because I think the Bills still end up winning, but I'd like the Colts to cover that 7-point spread.
Well, that is an interesting segue into Jim Darrow's big buck picks because Jim has, if you look at these all told, an awful lot riding on the Buffalo Bills this week. If the Bills should lose to the Colts, again, maybe not likely, but in the NFL, there's no such thing as a lock. Let me do some quick math here. That's $410 we have riding on the Buffalo Bills here, Jim, and that would put you under 1,000.
Yeah, well, I'm ready to make a move because I don't know what Devin's going to do when college football is over because he's going to have to pick NFL games coming up pretty soon. I'm just saying. But look, yeah, you're right. I mean, if the Bills lose, then I'm having an awful week, no matter what happens with everything else. But I just I don't necessarily think it's going to be close. And what Devin said about the Colts playing, well, yeah, they played fairly well, but they have not. They didn't play. They found a way to blow the game against the Texans. They had a chance to win there. This Bills team, they're either going to show me they're the best team in the AFC in the next couple of weeks, or they're just going to be one of the also-rans like everybody else. And I don't think that's who they are. I think they are the best team in the AFC. I've said it multiple times now. I think Josh Allen might be the best quarterback in the AFC, and that's saying something because Mahomes isn't playing great right now. Lamar Jackson isn't consistent enough. So the Bills have their chance. Here you go. And to play a team like the Colts, who – I don't know if they beat anybody worth a darn yet, unless you want to call San Francisco a good team. So we'll see. We'll see what happens there. And if you look at some of the rest of my picks, Falcons, I'm just throwing a line out in the water and seeing what happens there. I like the value at almost 2.5 to 1 against the Patriots tonight. I do think they play well. And then you go down. I love the Texans this week. And you talk about games where you might go back and look and wish you would have put more on it. I think this might be one of them for me because the Titans are in a really bad spot this week. I mean, you look at last week and you say, yeah, that wasn't the greatest of spots. They didn't cover, but they shouldn't have won. They really kind of got lucky in a way. Everything that could fall their way fell their way. I don't want to sound too bitter, but that's what happened there. And I agree. Tyrod Taylor coming in this week, I think now that he's had a full week to play and practice and everything, I think this Texans team could actually play fairly well down. And I say fairly well. I mean, fairly well for a bad team down the stretch. And I really like them here. Titans could completely be overlooking the Texans team after they played so many really good teams and given it everything they have to keep marching on. I would not be shocked at all if Houston knocks out a bunch of those remaining knockout picks and survivor pool picks this week. If you want looking for your upset of the week, you're like, there's no way that's going to happen. Pick of the week. I think it's Houston, and I think that they very well could win this game straight up. And that point spread has not moved at all week long, which tells me that big money's betting on Houston and Aunt Mabel's betting on the Titans, and I'm going to take big money just about every time. And then Cowboys-Chiefs big matchup. Look, I think Dak's going to have his way with this Chiefs defense. I'm not buying what the Chiefs are selling. They beat up on a Raiders team last week that's having all kinds of internal problems off the field. They got a new head coach. They're not figuring out what's going on. Derek Carr, obviously, he and John Gruden were super tight, and it's going to be a struggle, I think, for the Raiders going forward. I love the Cowboys this week because I'm just not buying Kansas City. And then, look, I'm spending a lot of money to bet the money line on the Giants, but I cannot fathom. And we joked about it via text that last week. I said Tampa Bay was a lock. Yeah, it was a lock that missed. You don't miss 2 locks in a row. And you talk about money line. I know it's 5.5 to 1, but I would be absolutely floored. And I mean floored if the Bucs lost straight up to the Giants. So I'm willing to spend $198 to win 36 because it's like free money, and my limit is 190. My limit is 200. Otherwise, I would have bet more on this game and to try to get some money back because I just don't see it happen. But stranger things have happened.
I mean, I agree with you. The Bucs have been much better at home. I don't see them losing that game. I also agree that that's way too many points for the Texans. I am a little interested you didn't do a money line parlay with your two big favorites there. Could have gotten minus 185.
Yeah.
But obviously, you're mitigating the risk a little bit this way. So my best big Bucs picks, I'm struggling here. I still have a chance to get back to Mount 500. So that's what we're going to go for this week. Spreading out the risk a little bit this week. I got San Diego State tomorrow night. I think UNLV has won back-to-back games after starting 0-8. Ripe for a letdown. Tulane's going to get it, man. I picked them last week, +3 against Tulsa. They went to overtime, but then lost by 6. So I didn't get, I lost the bet, kind of unlucky there. And then I just think Tennessee, I know Tennessee played Georgia last week, and it's a tough spot, the game after you play Georgia. But one thing about Josh Heupel's offenses, they tear apart worse teams. And I don't think anybody would tell you Tennessee doesn't have a lot more talent than South Alabama. And so I think Tennessee runs roughshod there. And then in the NFL, you talked about the Texans. I think that's way too many points for that game. I don't think the Titans are nearly as good as their record, particularly without Derrick Henry. Texans all the way. And then the other game I'm real interested in is the Jaguars. +6.5. I think that's a little overreaction to the 49ers looking good on Monday night. But we talk so much about schedule spots in the NFL, right? 49ers played Monday night. Now you're traveling across the country to Jacksonville, where it's supposed to be kind of hot and humid. A bunch of 49ers players not used to that. And, this line originally was 7, and I actually got it at 7 early in the week, and I loved it then. Still like it at 6.5, and I think it's all the way down to 6 now. That's just too many points. I think the look-ahead line on the thing was 4 or 4.5, and I'm not – I know the 49ers played well, but I'm not seeing why it moved that much. And so I'm on Jacksonville there. Man, it's a weird week to be on Jacksonville and Houston in the NFL, but that's where we're at. Devin Jackson, final thoughts on the weekend.
Hopefully everyone does better in the big Bucks picks. And
us.
Then we can all have positives going into next week. But yeah, this is probably going to be, I just have a feeling it's going to be a couple different upsets on Saturday and Sunday. Would not be surprised if some of those NFL picks that you guys made, like the Texans and the Jaguars, one of them could possibly get a win. I mean, every week it seems like we're talking about an NFL, and a huge underdog or a team no one expected to win wins. So it's very possible that those can happen, and interested to see how things continue to shape up in the college football playoff race as well, and see if Oregon can survive. Because I think they're at the biggest risk of anyone in the top 4.
Jim Derry, a quick final thought from you.
Well, kind of like in high school football, you always look to be playing Thanksgiving week. So all the teams this week that are fighting in the prep playoffs are looking to win this week so they can fight through and play in Thanksgiving week. And to me, in the NFL, it's separation week. The good teams, we're going to find out who they are, because in the next week or two, the good teams start to separate themselves from everybody else, and they start making that march toward the playoffs. Now, I know we have a 17-week season, so we're going an extra week. But I think if you're going to be a good team, and if you look at what Tampa Bay did last year, they started playing a lot better right around Thanksgiving, and they started that roll into the playoffs. I think we're going to find out in the next couple of weeks who our real Super Bowl contenders are, because they're going to start making their march. Hence why I really like Buffalo this week. And we'll see, San Francisco, Deebo Samuel talked about after the game, they asked him about beating the Rams and how they would be able to beat the Rams after losing to some kind of stinky teams. And he said, now's our time. And so we're going to see if San Francisco can make their little run. We're going to see if Minnesota, if they're a legitimate team and can make a little mini run. We're going to see if the Saints are any good, frankly. We're going to see what Dallas and Kansas City are. So this is one of my favorite weeks in the NFL regular season, because not just because you get to sit down and watch football all day on Thanksgiving, but that Sunday is, to me, this week is a very key week. This week and next week are key weeks in NFL football.
Well, speaking of next week, we want to wish you and yours a happy Thanksgiving and a start to the holiday season to everyone out there. Next Thursday, we don't take holidays. We will be here on At the Book. In fact, I will be live from the Caesar Sportsbook at Harrah's New Orleans next week in preparation of the Bills and Saints game. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to go live at 4 o'clock, so tune in after you've had your turkey dinner, maybe before you've had your turkey dinner, depending on. We'll have the Cowboys-Raiders game going on in the background. It's just going to be tons of fun. People will be there. We'll have some guests from Harrah's. And we might try to get Amy Just and Luke Johnson, our Saints beat writers, on the air as well. So tune in for that at 4 p.m. next Thursday. Speaking of Caesar Sportsbook, just want to mention one more time, you can go to NOLA.com/Caesars and get your free bet bonus. That will send you a link to download the app. The promo code will be built in. You'll get it. And when betting goes live here in the next few weeks, next couple of months, you will get that $100 free bet bonus, whether you deposit right now or whether you wait to deposit. It will be waiting for you. So go ahead and do that. Tune in next Thursday at 4 o'clock. And until then, we hope you all have a good weekend. For Devin Jackson and Jim Derry, I'm Zach Ewing. This has been At the Book.